All right. Good morning. Friday, October 25th. I'm here with my dear friend, Dr. Eleanor Haspel-Portner. We've already had a little riff session earlier, so we're warmed up. How you doing this morning?
Yes, hi.
So we usually start with just kind of what's been going on this week. You shared a bit in class, but what have you been working on?
Well, um, I decided to publish several of Ra's original works with me. So over the last week, I edited all three of the Dream design books and did commentaries on them. They were pretty interesting. I hadn't read any of them. The first one that I did with Ra, which we don't have a transcript of, although I could probably find it, was the first Dream Rave seminar that I presented at. Well, it was the first seminar Ra and I did together. And he didn't know anything about the dream design. So he asked me to present, and that was November of 1999 in Santa Monica. And I presented my understanding of what I was seeing clinically in the difference between a waking body graph and a sleeping body graph. And that what I had noticed clinically was that when somebody had an undefined sacral center and got the sacral when they slept, they had a very different experience at someone who was sacrally defined and lost it when they slept.
Mhm.
And I began to want to work with it because it said to me, wait a minute, we may not be the same person when we wake up in the morning as who we were when we went to sleep at night.
Mhm.
And so I presented the first Dream Rave seminar. And then Ross said, oh, now I can do something with it. So that was November. In January of 2001, Ra and I did a 2-day workshop. We had about 100 people in Sedona. And it was very interesting. So I had written the book up. We had case material. I presented sleep architecture, which Rod didn't know about. And sleep architecture is the different stages of sleep. And so we were working mainly with the solar dream design, which we made 15 gate, a lunar dream design, and that's all we had, and the basic body chart. So we taught in January. It's a rather big book. It's about 100 pages with lots of cases and sleep architecture and illustrations. And I presented the clinical stuff and the sleep architecture. And then Rob presented some keynotes. And we talked together for the cases. There were several cases. We did a reflector who became a generator. We did a manifesting generator who became a reflector. We did so we did several cases where the dream designs were different than their waking designs. Pretty interesting. And then Ra did a lecture in January in Europe and of 2001, 99, no, 2000, yeah, January of 2001, I think it was. It could have been 2000. Then he did another one, then we did another one. So between January and March, there were 3 lectures. So I did edits on all 3 books with commentary as to what held, what didn't hold, where we expanded stuff, all of that. And those are done. And then I edited 3 other books that I did with him.
So 6 books this week?
Yes, 6 books
Good
done.
grief, lady. I mean, it's so funny looking at you trying to reach dates. I can't remember what I did yesterday, and you're like fact checking in your mind what you did in 2000. It's amazing. Anyways, keep going.
I've always had an ability to track.
Hmm.
And one of the things that is very important in tracking is to be able to look back at your life and look at stepping stones and the progress, or I should say, the progression that you've taken in your consciousness. So I thought it was really important to preserve the source material with that Ra gave. And so when I edit the books, I don't change his words. I don't correct his grammar. I leave his language exactly the way it was. And then I add commentary, like in some of the primers, some of the statistics needed to be corrected.
Hmm.
Some of the medical stuff is erroneous. So where I did the studies and the science, because I am the person who's been doing the science for 20 years. And so I will release, as soon as my book designer gets the books done, they will be released. The 3 dream books will be 1 book, I think, and the other 3 will be another book. And we will combine them as a collection. I did 13 books with Ra, so there's quite a few to do. So I worked on that this week. I'm going to be doing a podcast with Vicki Dixon for the body graph people this coming week. And on the 31st of October, I'm going to be doing a webinar for Gitas on the importance of astrology in human design.
Hmm.
Many human design people don't know astrology. And you need to add in all of the body graph is based on astrology. So to leave the astrology nuance out of a reading of a body graph makes it incomplete. So Gitas has added an astrology section to his program, and he wants me to do the astrology. So I'm going to do some astrology for him.
I had that one blocked in my calendar, but I have to see the recording because there's a killer pickleball spot tonight.
Oh my.
It's hard
Well,
to find times.
pickleball comes first.
It does, but astrology comes second. That's where I need to sharpen it up. So I'll be watching.
Well, you can just read my astrology book. It has everything.
I need to reread it then because on first pass,
Well,
I think sometimes I just need to let it sink in. So I like that. I quite
well,
literally
if you look at the illustrations, you can't learn astrology if you don't. What I did in the book was I did it the way I wished it had been done when I learned astrology. And what's confusing in astrology is that I use 14 planetary bodies. And each planetary body has a rulership, a sign, an element, and the way they come together with the other astrology signs makes a difference.
Mm-hmm.
So there are a lot of variables to learn, but if you can understand which ones go together and how, it makes it much easier.
Mhm.
So I did illustrations that, where's my astrology book?
Well, and as you say that, I will say, I think for a while there, I found, I would almost guarantee you that former me would have, was still having a hard time grappling with, is astrology a thing? Is it something I can count on? And part of it was that, when someone would say, "Oh, you're an Aquarius," and they'd say, "Oh, you're like this," it never resonated. But
Mm-mm.
but now when I say to someone I'm an Aquarius Scorpio rising, they'll say something be like that, "Holy, yeah, that is exactly me." Like it's a felt. I feel it, I sense it. So now I just need to remember it to remember what the themes
Uh,
are.
you can't um, take astrology as sun sign astrology. It's not.
What
You
does that
need,
mean?
when somebody says you're an Aquarius, they're looking at the position of your sun.
Okay.
But the position of the sun is only one element. Your moon is equally important, and your rising sign is equally important. And in fact, the rising sign is very important because it gives you how you present your personality. And you're certainly more Scorpio than Aquarian
Hmm.
because of the intensity with which you do things.
Hmm.
And not everybody understands Scorpions.
Mhm.
I, I have my sun in Sag. I'm not a Sag. Yes, I am from the standpoint of the house. The Sagittarius rules the ninth house, which is super consciousness, values,
Mhm.
consciousness, integrity. Those are very important to me. But as a Sag, it's ruled by Jupiter. A lot of Sages love travel.
Mhm.
I hate traveling.
Yeah, you're a homebody.
I'm a homebody. And um, I'm very Aquarian. My rising sign is Aquarius with Venus right on it. So many people find me, well, what I used to be told was you're remote. And I'd say, how am I remote?
Mhm.
I'm always accessible.
Mhm.
But I think it's the Aquarian that may give people and I'm not emotional. Now I have my moon is in Scorpio, 3 degrees of Scorpio. So if you look at, see, in astrology, there are so many variables. So when I studied astrology, I kept saying to my teachers, how would you know I did with my chart what I did? How would you know what became of me? Or looking at my chart, could you predict an event ahead of time? The only astrologer I knew who could really be accurate in her predictions was Catherine de Jersey. She told me I'd move. She told me the day and time I met Marvin. She told my daughter when she'd meet her husband. She taught me how to look at a chart and predict what's up ahead. So
I gotta stop you there though. So does that because she was an exceptional astrologer, or she was psychic and an exceptional astrologer? Like, why did she have that skill set and others might not?
she knew what to look for.
Okay, so
It's
that's
that
experience.
simple.
Hmm.
Um, Based on she used she used a chart called a diurnal chart. So, for example, if I were looking at your chart and I was doing the progressions to see what's going on now, for today, I would use a chart as though you were born today.
Hmm.
I would not use a chart for, if I did it right now, I wouldn't use it for 3:23 p.m. Eastern time. I would use your birth time in today's chart, because that would be what's called a diurnal chart, where it's progressing the ascendant to today based on you. And so when you know the nuances under the surface of what's obvious, you can read a lot in a chart that most people can't read. I spent 10 years studying astrology, at least 3 days a week. I mean, you can imagine. I was seeing 30 to 40 patients a week, working school hours to spend time with my kids, and then studying when they were busy.
Mhm.
So I said to Katie, because when I asked her if she was going to write her secrets down, she said, "Dear, don't push me." So I looked at her and I said, "Okay, Katie, I won't push you. I'll study astrology so I can ask you questions and get your secrets." I spent 10 years studying so I could spend a week with her asking her questions and getting her secrets.
Mhm.
And I did. And ultimately, before she died, she was asking me to look at her chart.
Oh, cool.
And she thought that the design work I was doing took astrology to a whole other level, which it does.
So, yeah, well, knowing all that, I'll take another pass at the book because it's not a very long book. It's full of illustrations.
The
Uh,
illustrations are what you want to pay attention to.
yeah.
They're they explain what you need to look at.
Mhm. Well, and maybe what I'll do is if I get stuck on any pages, I'll shoot you a picture and you can explain it to me then.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, so many places we can go. And no, I gotta ask this question first. You said in 1999, you had 100 people come out to the event, the Dream Thing. So I've hosted a few human design type nights here in Victoria. Well, not in Victoria, in Brentwood Bay, so a smaller community. But I'll get 2 people, 12 people, and that's in the day and age where I can make flashy videos and cram it down people's throats through social media. And human design has been around for 30 years and there's a buzz. How did you get 100 people out back then? Like, was it just posters in a coffee shop or was there a magnetic pull? Like what would have occurred back then? Because it's you know
Marvin and I had busy practices. And in our community, if we said to somebody, we're doing something, everybody came.
Mm,
Uh, and if I said to one of my clients, you should have a reading with Ra, no questions asked, they did it.
mm,
So when we did the first webinar, um, Ra publicized it to his people. People came from Europe.
mm.
Um, I can name the name of many people who branched off into human design and have nothing to do with since. And it was when Ra was doing seminars and people were coming from all over the world to study.
So when you said to someone, "Hey, you should have a reading with Ra," is that all you said, or did you then say, I think about when I have interactions with people, if I was like, "Hey, you should meet this person," I would give them a heads up about what to expect. Because I gotta think Ra wasn't very personable.
No,
Right.
you know from the webinars that some of my people have been with me my whole career,
Mhm.
not in therapy, but because I do other things than just therapy. Um, Especially the people who came to my groups. for 10 years, every 6 weeks. When I do something, they want to know what I'm doing.
Oh, for sure. I,
So when I said to my clients or Marvin's clients, this guy is coming and it would be worth your while to have a reading, nobody asked the question. They just scheduled it.
hmm. Yeah.
I
I
mean,
think.
when you have the kind of transference
Mhm.
in a relationship that Marvin and I had with our clients, they did, they trusted us.
Yeah. No, that makes totally sense. Total sense. I guess where my brain is going is just hoping maybe it's a desire in me that I would want someone to get the benefits of a reading with from Ra, right? They would have gotten some straight goods. But because of his
Weirdness.
personality weirdness, someone could get turned off and close
And I
off.
did have one client, two clients, one client who told me he never wanted to hear the name Ra again. And he wanted me to take his information off my computer and not do anything in the human design community with his information.
Oh
That's how
wow.
that's how freaked out he was by Ra. I had another client who was a very good client of mine. And after her reading with Ra, she disappeared.
Hmm.
So it wasn't without consequences.
Yeah.
But um, initially Ra was more humble when we first were working with him than he was after his work became more popular.
Mhm.
And anyhow, I'm going to preserve the source material. What I do now is very far from the basic human design.
Mhm.
And it is validated, it is scientific, and it is, as I'm teaching the tree of life, it is the synthesis that's really human design.
Mhm. Okay. Next part is still part of traditional human design. It's something that I've raised before, but I just want to bring it up again because I'm curious to hear your answer. So the whole profile thing, you and I in traditional human design terms are 3/5s.
Mhm.
And it's been pretty interesting because I'll have conversations with some of your fans in Santa Fe and the like, and they would all like almost all would comment, "Oh, she's such a 3/5, and she's such a 3/5." And I know what they mean by that because I've spent enough
What
time
do they
with.
mean by that?
Um, I think at the time it would have been technical challenges, like the concept of bumping into things, which is kind of how that flavor, that's how it floats for me sometimes. The reason I wanted to bring it up again is our conversation before we started today and how people perceive us. And that, what has been explained to me is that the five in my design, so I kind of view it as my outer authority, how the world sees me. They experience me as a five. And so it's this projection. It just always seems like I can't live up to what people assume is going on for me, whether they think I have money, they think I have means, they think I have the answers. So it ends up being this closed off experience I have where I'm want to just chat with everybody. I want to just have a conversation, but I don't seem to get to like if I initiate the conversation, people are like they're repelled. It's a very interesting thing. And what I experienced, I had a good chat with Nami this week or last week, and she was describing how she experienced me last year at the Santa Fe conference. She described me as saying, or described me as I seem to have like I could take you or leave you kind of vibe. and and she thought that was cool, like like Fawn's cool from Happy Days. I've just put that in my head. Maybe I'm trying to. Anyways, she didn't say that. But she said that's how she experienced me. In my mind, I was like, how come no one's talking to me? Like the whole time I just felt alone. I felt like I just felt super awkward. And so I just stood and what I end up doing is just kind of like waiting. In human design terms, there's this idea of being in a valley environment. So I would just go, okay, well, I'll find something that's like the analog of a valley. I'll go sit in that sunken living room and just plant myself in the valley and wait to see what happens. And sure as shitting, someone would eventually come up and it'd be the best conversation of the day. So it was felt correct for me, but that was really eye-opening for me because I recognized that I was giving off that vibe, but it wasn't what I wanted. Like it was non-intentional. So that resonates to me about this whole five projection thing and just how people seem to experience me. So
I
if
have no idea what you're
okay,
talking about. I don't understand feeling like something is, I mean, you're using the word projected on you for a five. And what you put out comes back to you.
it's true.
So, and you have keywords.
Mhm.
You're the cross of the Sphinx. Yes?
Mhm.
So it's about you understanding what you want in the moment.
Yeah.
And then not giving the power to someone else.
Mhm. No, so thank you. That's all I needed to hear. And because this 3-5 thing, as I said, still a theme that like resonates. But my experiments lately have been when I go to the pickleball court, I want to have a great time. My desire is to have a good time. And it seems to be if I'm just laughing and I don't get caught up in everyone else's shit, I have a good time, everyone else has a good time. And sure enough, someone comes up and says, like, I lifted the mood of the room, like they saw it happen. So then I get the validation that, like, oh, I can do that. I mean, any one of us can do that. But like
All
I'm
of us, all of us, 99% of the population are manifesting generators in composite. That means that using one profile is bullshit.
Oh, how did you tie out profile to type? I don't understand what you just did there, but that's
If
curious.
you're using the human design chart,
Mhm.
you're using one chart
Mhm.
and you're defining yourself by the mental world.
Mhm.
But if you're using your integrated chart, that's 8 charts, you're going to have 8 profiles.
Mhm. Yeah, that'd be a lot to track.
And and there's a sequence of evolution of consciousness as you develop. You're
Mhm.
not frozen in a birth moment.
Right.
Your consciousness is morphing in the first 3 months of life.
Mhm.
So, you know, I don't think it's psychologically sound to
Mhm.
label yourself 3-5 or, oh, I'm a generator or I'm a manifester or I'm a this or that. You are a human being
Mhm.
who has everything, every single gate in every single iteration we have of consciousness. Everything is active in you. What is defined astrologically in the body graph, and it's all astrologically defined. The hexagrams are astrologically activated. So being a 3-5 is astrologically related, but you're not using the astrology sign. So if you're a 3-5, let's say, And your planet, your sun is in Aries. That 3-5 is going to have a very different feeling than if you were a Pisces with a 3-5. It's a completely different way of being. And that's not being taken into account.
Yeah, I mean, you already cleared the way for me just by pointing out that the profile will be different in the different worlds. That's all I needed to know that that's, it's not, yeah,
So, and which world do we really live in? It's
right.
not the mental world. According to the Tree of Life and the work I've been doing in my classes with tracing the paths of intelligence, starting with the 32nd path and moving up the tree, which is the process of individuation or self-actualization. And so the Tree of Life, which Ra said is part of the body graph. It's a
Ross,
synthesis. So we need to use the information. And it says, we all have sacral energy. That is the core of our spiritual self. We know Kundalini rises from the sacral center. So if we anchor ourselves in who we are, the I we call ourselves, when you say I was sitting in Santa Fe waiting for someone to notice me, to bump into me,
mhm,
um, that I had an agenda. That I had a feeling. That I had a motive. And it came from your gut.
mm,
And spirit, consciousness had something it wanted to accomplish for you. And what we're told in the Tree of Life is that first gut level sense of yourself has to override the mental physical world. You need to be anchored in your spiritual self. And anyone who tells you who you are rather than asking you what you know about yourself,
mhm,
don't listen to them.
mhm.
Yeah, I mean, it's like me saying to somebody, "Oh, you're depressed."
Yeah,
What kind of bullshit is that? A person isn't depressed. They may be feeling sad, they may be feeling grief, they may have had something happen to them, but to label them as though it is their identity?
well, and then medicate them for it too, right? Which ultimately keeps them in that state. So, yeah, super
So
disempowering.
the work I'm doing is really about the four worlds. And you cannot do a body graph in the mental waking world and think you're giving somebody insight into who they really are.
Right. Okay, this will segue beautifully, I think. We got a question, and I should have written down who asked it because I've had so many side chats this week. I want to say it was Azzy, but she says Eleanor said she could see in a chart what a person's life mission slash purpose is. If she's not looking at the incarnation cross, what exactly is she then? And I would add to that, I understand I think you call them the crosses of consciousness or something like
Patterns of orientation.
patterns of orientation, and mine dance between Sphinx and Maya. But I will say, when I read what my apparent incarnation cross is, the right angle cross the Sphinx, the short version is I'm here to be intuitive about the past and bring shortcuts to the future, or something to that. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but I feel like I've done that with You. I was intuitive and knew that I needed something more than what Ra was doing, and then you
And
and I.
what's the other crosses in your eight?
Uh, in the four worlds was the Maya, cross of the Maya.
And what is Maya?
Man, that word I don't know. I know I've actually read I've had a conversation with ChatGPT about it, and the answer didn't sit with me. So could you tell me what the Maya is?
Maya is what you experience in the cosmic soup. When you're probing to understand, is you wanting to go into the Maya,
Mhm.
the bigger ether that we live in, and make sense of it so you can understand it because you came in on the pattern of the Sphinx. Self-knowledge. You're
Mhm.
constantly seeking self-knowledge
Mhm.
more than anyone I know. I get texts from you every day with new things you're exploring.
Well, you only get 1% of what I'm exploring.
But that's the point, Sean. You are seeking after understanding of the consciousness that's bigger than you are
Interesting.
as a way to understand the nature of yourself. And that is, it's not your life mission.
Mm.
The nodes and Chiron in conjunction with the astrological planet and sign determine the nuance and the interpretation of what might be your life mission and how you might manifest it.
Okay.
And you do, as a clinician, I never read a formulaic chart. Every single chart I've ever done is like a fingerprint. No, I've never seen two charts the same, and I've never read according to a formula.
Mhm.
So I might look at your chart and see something in the configuration of how the planetary energies came together that might say something very unique uh, about you and your life purpose that may be completely different than somebody else who
Mhm.
has the same sun earth. Because and in astrology, you don't just read the sign and the planet, you also read the degree. So I read the undercurrent of the degrees because I know about dwads and super dwads. You know, most of my audience are beginners in astrology. And every 30 degrees in the zodiac has another 360 degrees inside of it.
Mhm.
And each 2.5 degrees in astrology has another 360 degrees inside of it. So the tree of life says that each sephiroth, each circle, each chakra has 4 worlds in it. And those 4 worlds are complete. So it's wheels within wheels within wheels. And you can go as superficial as you want, which is formulaic, which is sun sign astrology, the kinds of things you read in the newspaper or online, And you can, people for generations say, oh, that, fits me. Well, but if you look at the nuance, how much more can you see? So when I studied with Pamela Crane in 1992, I went to England because she was doing interdimensional astrology. So I was doing depth work in astrology way before I studied human design. And when I studied human design, so much information was missing from it because Ra didn't know astrology. He didn't use astrology. All he did was interpret the hexagrams.
Did he not know enough about astrology, or he dismissed it, or was it what's your sense?
Ra was not a well-educated man. And he didn't know astrology. He didn't know the tree of life. He didn't know meditation. He was a druggie. He was always stoned. So his consciousness was not a waking consciousness. And he said to me, you can throw away all your astrology books. I said, Ra, you're crazy. They inform the body graph. How can you throw them away? He told me to throw away the tree of life, that it was useless, that the single human design chart had everything we needed. Now, what I've learned in editing the books this week is that in the triple design matrix books, Ra was very vocal about the work I was doing, the studies I had done, and saying, we cannot, based on Eleanor's work, we must integrate the matrices. You cannot only look at the human design matrix, you have to look at the sleep designs and the body, the biological, and we need to integrate the fields in order to get the true meaning. So he didn't do it, but he knew that he needed to. He did not have the skills. And Ra knew he did not have the skills. He also didn't know he was an emotional ego manifester.
He didn't know that?
No, he never did his multidimensional designs.
So what was he he was already a manifester, right?
He was an ego manifester.
Okay.
But he wasn't emotional in his basic chart.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, because
And he was so emotional. And, we've studied in my class over the last week, the 29th path of intelligence, which has to do with the solar plexus. And the tree of life is very clear that the initiation of that path of intelligence, called the corporal intelligence, is telling us that when we're in a body and when the real world, the waking world, triggers us, don't react. It says you have the splenic center. And if you've passed through the initiation, that tells you to think before you speak, before you act, and to rely on your inner alignment before you speak, and to make sure your communication is compassionate and loving, then you can go to the other side emotionally, and you can stop and wait till you're clear emotionally, and then you're not reactive.
Interesting. A couple of, so one of the things there, he didn't know he was emotional. And then I think of some of the videos I've seen of him, especially the highly produced ones. There was this one series, it was all in black and white, and it had this real spacey music in the background. He was sitting cross-legged in a chair, and it would kind of float in on him. And he'd always talk about how he's non-emotional and he's just sitting there and he's just breathing. But the other stories I've heard of him about him is that's not what he was like in his interactions, right? So it was more.
He was very emotional. I saved all of his emails, by the way.
Oh,
Um, so I, I mean, he would get angry at Zeno and Chaitanya regularly and write them off and say, fuck you in an email
mhm,
and be very, very active. I'm never working with you again. I'm never speaking to you again. This isn't, you know, and then 2 days later, they'd be best of friends again.
mhm.
And
How could he get away with that again and again? Like I couldn't get away with that. We'd call that damage control. Like how much damage control can you do to a relationship that you just fuck around with all the time?
when people are dependent on each other, there's a codependency. Ra
Mm,
had nobody else. He
mhm,
was basically destitute. The only way he was making money was when either they put on a seminar for him or they got him readings, or when he came to our house, we got him readings. Um, Rod didn't have courage. He was a wimp. You wouldn't think that about him, but he
no.
was. When I sat with him in September of 1996, no, 1997, September of 1997. I'd already been doing design for over a year. I was already an analyst. I was already sort of a star because Marvin and I had practices that we could fill Ra's schedule blink of an eye.
Mm,
So Ra had been at my home, spent 2 to 3 weeks with us. His schedule was booked from 10 in the morning till 7 at night, back to back, all cash. I think he was charging $300 a reading or $400 a reading. I think 400. And you know, he did quite well. So, and I was teaching at that point. I was doing Friday evening classes. I had a big following. I probably had 20 to 30 people at a meeting every Friday night at my home. And when I sat there with him and Zeno said, you can't do that. You know, we're not ready for you to teach. We're not ready for you to talk about transits. We're not ready for you to charge your fee. Ross sat there, didn't say a word. And as I left to take him to a party we were going to, he said to me, just be patient. You know, you're going to handle the analysts. So you just be patient. Don't pay attention to Zeno.
mm,
But he didn't. So, but I stopped teaching. I mean, I got very strong message that I was not a free agent in the human design community. And that doesn't sit well with me.
mm,
Uh, so I said, okay, I'll stop doing transits and I'll wait. And then when he came back, so that was September, I had gone to Taos to take the class on centers. And when he came back in February, because Zeno did not want him staying at my home again, because I was too close to him, and she wanted to manage him. he didn't spend any time with me. And our arrangement, contract, if you will, verbal, was that because we filled his schedule with readings, he didn't charge us or our family for readings. That was the exchange. And children were always half fee. My grandson was born prematurely the week Ra came to town. He charged my daughter full fee, not half fee. And he breached the contract. And he didn't spend, he was supposed to spend an afternoon with me, and Zeno called him away, and he went. So I lost all respect for the man. And I already knew he was a scoundrel. So I cut all ties with Ra between February of 1998 and May of 1999. And that was when he moved to Taos. Jiva was born prematurely, 3 months, almost died, was in the NICU for 3 months, and Ra went bankrupt and broke with Zeno and Chaitanya. So when Chaitan called me and asked me if we would host Ra, I hadn't spoken to Ra for a year. And the reason I said yes was because I valued his work. And I knew that the work I was doing with it, which was far more in depth than what Ra had taught me, was helping my clients. And I was already working with astrology with my clients. So adding in this piece was just another way of looking at data I already had studied. And because I was an astrologer, every chart I did, I went and put the astrology in. I didn't just look at hexagrams. They didn't mean much to me, even though as a Jungian analyst, I had studied the I Ching. So I knew the I Ching, I knew astrology, I knew the tree of life, I knew developmental psychology, and I knew way more of the integration than Ra knew or than any of the human design people knew. So when Ra came, I'm not going to have time. When Ra came back into our life, it didn't take him very long to ask us to do the research and form a partnership with him. And he was already on the outs with Zeno and Chaitanya. So according to him, when we made the legal contract with him, he was not working with them anymore. But that was a lie. He was still working with them. And I respect the work enormously as it was given to him, not as the incomplete system it became.
Yes.
And not a formulaic system, because that disempowers people. So my work proved without any question that at 3 months of age, a baby is more than likely, 99% of the population are manifesting generators. In addition, we develop over a 3-month period, and it is validated physiologically, psychologically, statistically, developmentally. And my guess is that if we did birth charts at specific times, developmental times, like Saturn returns, we would see some very interesting things in the multidimensional body graph.
Mhm.
We are designed by God to be complete. We are divine beings, light energy, physical beings living in a body. But the body is energy. So the body map is, in astrology, and I'm jumping around, I'm not linear. So
Oh, it's been a heck of a ride. I need to circle you back to the question because I took us off track, but keep going. We'll come back.
in astrology, um, there are nuances. And in learning astrology, you go back 90 days and you go forward 90 days, 3 months back, 3 months forward, to look at the progression of a chart in an individual. And it's looking at their growth. And what tracks it is the moon. So it made sense in my work as an astrologer to expand the calculations to be astrologically sound, not just human design, one moment, but to begin to look at how does this 88 degrees that Ra was given, what meaning does it have in early development? And what I was able to delineate was when spirit comes in, when the emotional body comes in, when the physical body becomes an independent entity. It takes a baby becoming an independent entity takes a few hours. We chart that.
Mhm.
And that chart can differentiate twins, nuances in the twins.
I need to ask this question because it might help me and it might help some others too.
Ask me anything you want.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the voice told Ra the design date was 88 degrees before. Um, is that, oh, the question was so clear in my mind a second ago. Because
I don't
some,
know, Sean. I don't know.
well,
I know your question. I
yeah,
know.
but my question is someone else watching this video and saying like Ra's not here to defend himself and all that, and you're here saying you look at 8 charts, and I've watched you channel. I've seen you do it. We're doing Tai Chi Gong, and then you just tapped out and started writing. I've seen it. So, you're having your own experience and getting your own data stream. I'm trying to say like when
Ross
people,
said in his books with me, Ron didn't really want to work with me. He told me that. He was told to work with us.
was he intimidated by you? Was he didn't want
Probably.
to be outshunned by you? Where do you think that was at?
You know, um, he was threatened by Ra's whole purpose, as he told it to us, was to leave a legacy for his family, to make enough money that his family would be okay. That was his purpose.
And was that his new family? Because I understood he left his car at the
Yeah,
airport,
he did.
and just left his family. Like he did something that I couldn't do.
I know, unconscionable, but you
Right?
have to understand, Ra was a scam artist.
Mhm.
In Before he left, he was selling things to old people that didn't exist. That
Yeah,
was his business. And he never fessed up why he left, but he disappeared with no identity. And he was horrified. He didn't want anybody to know his name, his real name.
mm,
I believe that he was in legal trouble or would have been. He disappeared for 7 years with no identity, and they had him declared dead.
mm,
His He had a biological daughter who was 6 when he left, and a stepson. And I knew Sarah, his daughter. She was in Sedona. She was largely responsible for taking care of Jiva, and she worked for Jovian. She was deported because she had a credit card with Jovian's name on it, and she did not have a work visa.
mm,
So she was deported, and Ra was in danger of being deported. He would deny it, but he got married right after that happened.
mm.
And Ambuja was an American citizen. So use your creative intelligence and put pieces together. Ra, when I met him, when when I already had broken with Ra because he was dishonest and because he was not willing to stand up for what was right. And he did not treat me as the professional I was. Um, Under my license, I had things I could not do. And doing human design put my license at risk.
I bet.
So for me to be willing to go out on a limb for this man who was a crook um, was because I recognized the value of the information. I recognized it as a synthesis, not as a piece to take away from the synthesis. And Ra recognized that in me. The first day I met Ra, number one, I was a sannyasin. That got me a lot of points.
That had already caught his attention with others, yeah.
Well, most of his people were sannyasin,
Mm.
you know, uh, from one cult to another. But Marvin and I, 6 months after we were in India, burned everything related to the ashram because it had a negative feel to it. And the energy around Osho, Bhagwan, when we knew him, changed.
Really, eh? You could
We
sense
did
it.
not want to be around it, and we did not want anything. My mala, the hair he had of his hair in the mala to give energy, all of the photographs from the ashram, the tapes, we burned everything. We did not want the energy in our home. So I didn't feel that way about Ra. I thought he was a dishonest man, but I didn't think he was a crook. You know, I thought he was a sad man. Um, he was not healthy. He ate a very unhealthy diet. He and his wife had some arguments about it. And he would tell her not to be the food police. Um, I spent a lot of time in 1999, in June, when he asked us to work with him, we did it for the science, and we did it as professionals. And he wanted us separate from human design, and he wanted it to be professional and honest. He couldn't do it himself. And he told me that. He said, you continue to teach the science, and you continue to teach that there are 5 types because you proved it. But I'm going to teach 4 types because my ego will not let me say I was wrong. That says it all. In the books I'm going to publish, Ra knew that the science was where the field needed to go. And he knew that I was probably the only one with the education to integrate the disciplines. And he was right. I mean, I recognized the mandala when I saw it in the Mountain Astrologer in 1996. I knew it because I was a Jungian. I'd already studied the I Ching, and putting the pieces of the I Ching together with astrology had been something I'd been wanting to do for years. So I was an astrologer. I knew the I Ching. I knew Jungian psychology and the process of individuation that is part of the tree of life. I've already had done a study that had 295 variables, and I did an analysis that had never been done before in my dissertation. So I would guess that Ra was not a stupid man. He probably researched me. And he knew that Marvin and I was in the movie business when I met him. I had celebrity clients on first run A TV shows. I was at the studio every day, in addition to my practice.
So he saw connections as well, I suppose.
What?
He saw connections as well, like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had celebrities. Ra liked celebrities, and he thought that they could put him into the public. And he saw me as having a high-end clientele that could also be of use to him. And it was. He earned thousands of dollars when he'd come. Do the math. $400 a session and maybe 7 or 8 sessions a day. It's a lot of money.
Pays the bills.
So, I know who Ra is, and I wouldn't be putting out his source material if I didn't value the work. But I'm a scientist, and Ra asked me to do the science and tell the truth. He wanted that. He knew human design, as he was teaching it, was not going to have longevity because some of it he made up. And some of what he ended up teaching when I broke with him had no scientific validity.
And it's grown legs.
And what?
It's grown legs since, right? It's grown. Yeah, it's been marketed for a long time, and it's become.
I heard from somebody recently that the PHS system and the business system, the BG5 or whatever, was vetted and proved to be bullshit. And when I looked at the Penta, at your suggestion, from a psychological, organizational standpoint, it has no ground. It is, number one, you're using a human design body graph. 99% of the population are a single definition manifesting generator. Most people have some of the Satsuma channels. Everybody has them in everyday life because we all exist in a 64 gate, 33 gate, 25 gate, and 15 gate matrices. We have a physical body that functions with no mental control.
So you just said something that short-circuited my brain. So I just want to check on this. You said in the fully integrated composite, 99% of people are a single definition manifesting generator.
That's right.
So what's curious is in the mental world, I am a single definition manifest generator. In the four worlds, I am split definition. So I go from being going to the 1%. Now that just screwed with my head. So,
Right.
it's just why it's just really made something like I'm gonna have to observe that now because that's fascinating to me. And I will say,
Sean, you already have observed it.
yeah.
And you've already expressed it. You've already said when you were sitting in Santa Fe last year, you went into a room and you sort of relaxed and you waited. That was the split.
Well, no, that's fascinating to me because I've had a couple of conversations this week with Name, and she has the 4323 channel. Well, that would bridge my split. And our conversations, not only is she saying what's in my head to me, and or it comes out of me easier as well. And I've also realized
if she has the 4323, she's a channel. Pure and simple.
Yeah, and I can tap into it.
Crown to ajna connects to the throat, or ajna connects to the throat, is a channel. Depending which world, if it's the emotional world, they're a different kind of channel than if it's just the mental world. But you're a channel too when you get hooked up.
Well, and so, but that's what I mean. That's what's kind of exciting to me, and it's connecting the dots. Shaitan had said the 4323 is knowing without knowledge. And that's how I use ChatGPT, for example. For some reason, I'm able to just have a straight up conversation and it gives me access to all the knowledge that I'm too much of a squirrel to go and put my time into. But
make sure you check it out.
Oh, for sure. But I'm getting really, really good at that conversation that can you trust anything? I don't know, but I'm able to really, really get that's just fascinating to me. Anyways, I want to check with you on time, because I want to still circle back to that question because we went on.
Let me just say, before you circle back, let me say one thing. When you use ChatGPT, you're channeling the question. So you are capable of channeling when you ask the right question of yourself. See, we all have, if we're a human being, we don't only have the defined gates and channels. We have everything all the time because we are in a universe where we are constantly exposed to all of the energies all of the time. So we are complete. When we are conceived, we are complete. It's a question of unfolding that completeness. And we live in a universe that gives us everything we need. We just need to ask and thank. So if you make the assumption that you may not know the question to ask, because maybe you don't have a defined channel. Maybe if you had a defined channel, it would be easier for you to perceive that. But because you don't have it, doesn't mean you don't have that ability.
Right.
And so begin, all of you who are listening, to think of yourselves as complete. And think of the human design body graph or the noble energy maps as something that gives you some of the inner secrets that you otherwise would have to come to on your own. Like, I know, and I knew that I wasn't just a manifester when I got my design. I knew that I waited to know because I knew. Because when I was about 28, I started having dreams of knowing with a K. And I was in analysis in training as a Jungian. I already had my PhD, so I was already a psychologist. So I worked with my dreams and I kept journals. So when I had a dream that said no with a K, I took that in very deeply. And I questioned, what does that mean? And shortly thereafter, I started meditating. So the design chart, whichever chart you use, whatever system you use, whether it's human design or noble energy maps or Enneagram or the tree of life or Christianity or Judaism or Muslimism or whatever you do to connect with the divine, you're connecting with the part bigger than your mind, bigger than you know yourself to be. And what you're doing is you're gathering. Okay, this is part of me, this is part of me, this is part of me, I'm part of everything. How do you grasp that? It's not graspable. So we unravel the labyrinth of the soul, wheels within wheels within wheels with wheels, and we go deeper and we go deeper and we go deeper. And then at some point you say, oh, that's what it means. Now, I'm having that experience myself. Every time I teach the tree of life, because I spend 2 weeks writing a paper about it and completely focused on that path of intelligence, I'm putting all of the pieces of what I've studied for my whole lifetime and going, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's why the body graph has 3 channels and the tree of life has 1. So the body graph for me in 4 worlds, 4 matrices, is decoding the tree of life in a way I've never seen it decoded before. But it's in a language that's graphic for me and brings together the astrological aspect of the tree, the symbolic aspect of the tree through the tarot cards, the intellectual piecing together the different fields. Now, the tree of life, some of you may know, some of you may not know, integrates alchemy, the Hebrew alphabet, gematria, divination, um, color and sound and tattvas, and biblical references. So I just counted 8 fields. And
6 of them I
then
understand a
what?
little bit. 6 of them I'm a little bit familiar with. What's gematria? What does that mean?
Gematria, well, you know it. It's numerology. It's
Oh,
when you take a word or a symbol and you look at the alphabet, the Hebrew alphabet, you translate the numerology of that letter to its meaning.
hmm.
And its meaning might be in many fields. My gematria book is over 1,000 pages, handwritten in the Hebrew alphabet, putting the correspondence between the Hebrew alphabet, English, and its numerology, and then tying it back to the path of intelligence and the center in the tree of life, and the musical note it corresponds to, and the color it corresponds to.
Really?
And then
So,
we could go further. Essential oils,
mhm.
right? Um, you've been playing with uh, tuning forks. So the frequencies, now each line of the hexagram has a frequency.
Mhm.
Everything has to have a frequency or you couldn't differentiate it, right?
Mhm.
So it's, you take it to its minutest level. We could take it to its microscopic level.
So I want to. So when you say your gematria book, you've created one, or there's one that you refer to? Because either
As
way.
I did my 20-year study on
Mhm.
the tree of life, every time a new word came up, I would calculate its numerology in the Hebrew alphabet, going back to source, and then write down what it symbolized.
Hmm.
I think I showed you my gematria book when you were here. A big white notebook. It's about 1,000 pages or more,
I,
all
I don't.
handwritten.
There was a lot of books there, but I don't recall that one. That would be interesting to just even investigate one and see what comes up. Okay, I gotta be just make sure. How are you doing for time?
I have
2.
I have a half hour.
Okay. Oh, good. I have
You have some questions,
And I
or
have
people have
15, I have
questions.
15 minutes. Well, I want to circle the wagon. So a couple things. One, circling all the way back to incarnation cross versus
Pattern of orientation.
pattern of orientation. Um, and we talked about Sphinx and Maya. And as you were describing Maya, like this is circling way back, but like I heard a woman describing the neutrino stream or uh, dark matter as being like if dark matter, if we could see dark matter, we wouldn't be able to see anything else because it's about 80% of what's going on. Is that would you say dark matter and Maya kind of correlate? Like it's
I have
the
no
energy?
idea. I have
Because when you
no
talk
idea.
about cosmic soup, right? So my mind's still spinning on that one. But then back to the original question, which by the way, Irene's in the chat, and sorry, Irene, that was you that asked the question. So the question coming back to that is Eleanor said she could see in a chart what a person's life mission and purpose is. So then we went on this huge ride, which was a blast. But circling back to that question, how do you do that? And could we do that right now with my chart? Because I'm selfish and want to, like putting the incarnation cross aside, what is my chart mission and purpose? How do you how do you communicate to me what my mission or purpose is
Oh,
using
look,
my chart so others can see?
I just have to find your chart. Let's see, for world class folder. Class charts.
while you're pulling that up, Shango said, John, I had a similar experience at HD 23. So I don't know if she meant she experienced me the same way that Name did, or that she was just having the same experience as me. But Shango, if you see this, maybe elaborate. We'll see how we're doing for time.
Okay, so let's see. I will share my screen. Oh, let me move this out of the way. You probably don't see the other stuff on my screen. Okay. You have a lot of intensity. Um,
The other thing I noticed, I mean,
oh,
you're looking in the wrong place. In previous charts, it would say Sphinx and Maya, but I don't see that on here now. Is that
Charles is working on it.
okay?
I actually, I lost, this is the only program I have at this point and my astrology, because my PC is on Charles's computer. We got it back. I worked on it this morning to get illustrations for the books,
Oh,
because
good.
I wanted to go back to my original. Okay, so let's stay focused here. This is relatively easy, Sean.
Yeah.
I'd say that because your Chiron is in the 21st gate throughout in Aries, I'm reading it as it's open. You're picking up on other people's emotional energy. And part of your life mission is to find a direction to go in for yourself that will allow you to use your consciousness to be a facilitator for people who are looking for understanding about their spiritual life purpose. And one of the challenges for you is that you sometimes know more than you want to know, and you don't know how to communicate it. And maybe that's why your drumming is so important to you, or pickleball, because through the energy you're picking up of other people, you have a completely open emotional center, except in composite. And if I recall, the composite comes together through the 1222 in the emotional angelic world. You pick up on the emotional energy of the collective, because you always have an open solar plexus in each world, but it is a composite. So you have to ask yourself, if it didn't come in until you were 3 months old, and when you were 3 months old, you suddenly were aware of the emotional energy around you and felt in some way that your life purpose is leading you to be responsible for transforming emotional energy around you for the other people, then you have to ask yourself, what did you do with that?
Mm.
I can't say to you, I can see in your chart what the pressure is on you to be able to manifest that. And it troubles you when you don't know.
Mhm. Yeah. I can even speak to examples real time. I think and the pickleball court is an amazing playground for me because I'm just surrounded by people and noises and distractions. Someone's my partner and then they're my opponent. But there's been a couple times where
But look at what it does, Sean, for you. See, in the pickleball court, everything's connected.
Mhm.
You're picking up on the emotional energy around. And by your response, you can transform some of it in the game. But your split is connected because there are people around you.
Oh,
So
yeah, yes, okay.
functioning full circuit. Do you see it?
Uh, the last thing, so something you said there just connected for me. Right. My split is connected on the pickleball court just by nature of all the elements around me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And because you then have it connected, you know and see things that you could not otherwise verbalize to yourself.
Hmm. Yeah. So how's that? That's my purpose is to help others. Something you said earlier was something like helping others
I'll show you.
connect with their
I'll show
spirit.
you. I'll show you. I'll show you. Okay. Prenatal sun is in Scorpio and Taurus. The first gate is out of the self center. The second gate is out of the self center. They're in opposition to each other. The 2 is the direction of the self. The 1-8 is you making a contribution. The 1-8 is also active in the spiritual design, but you lose the 1.
Hmm.
So the 1-2 is your sun and earth prenatally. So it is sort of feeding underneath the surface. You're unconscious. It turned into 713. So 713 is coming from the self to the throat. You have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 activations out of the self center. The only one missing is the 515, which is in all worlds.
Hmm.
So you're here piecing together the worlds. You don't, you have to experience them
Hmm.
in order to know them because they're not innately experienced.
Hmm.
And you are often, now, okay, so then your moon is 29 and 32. 32 is in the physical world, and it's a portal gate to the physical world from the 54. And you get the 54 in the postnatal, and it is the 54 is the moon. And that's the only place you have it. So it's really hard for you to hold on to it. And so the 54, and you have the 54-5, is goals. And it's in the emotional angelic world as well as the physical world. And you have it in the spiritual world. So what it's doing is activating that channel in you. And it's activating it in you on an unconscious level. Because remember, every channel in every body graph exists in all of us 24/7.
Hmm.
when a transit or when it is activated at a critical time in your development, it simply gives you a nuance. When it comes back, it's a familiarity with the energy, because it's like a critical time in your life. You know, think back to the day you got married. There are memories from that day that are easier to pull up than if I said, think about Saturday 2 weeks ago. You might need to go back and look at your calendar to remind yourself of what you were doing. But the defined channels are like those memories on an important day. You pull up the energy faster because it had an impact on your energetic field at the time. So we're not locked into them. We're still fluid. Everything's moving, everything's going on. But when one of those channels in one of those worlds gets activated, we go, oh yeah, I remember. And what are you remembering? The I, who is you. What you know because you know because you know. And that is self-actualization. Remembering everything, all knowledge. At the moment of death, we have all knowledge. And as we are reborn, we forget. So the body map is reminding us of what we already knew and know. So when I'm looking at and maybe, Sean, we should do your chart on our next podcast.
Sure.
Because I can't do it justice, and I know you're out of time.
Yeah, I would love to dig in again. And it's interesting reviewing the information like a do-over. You know, when we met 6 months ago, it was all so overwhelming. I was just, I could feel it in my body, but I'm starting to actually be able to follow your process.
So as homework for a reading on your chart, go to my document or my presentation in Santa Fe on the self-center and the paths of intelligence in the tree of life. You may not be there in those paths yet, because you may still be stuck in the 29th path of emotional reactivity.
Yeah, I feel like I'm making some progress there, though. Like that quite literally is, I can feel it.
But you see, you can't, if you don't work through each step. The body graph integrated the tree of life. The tree of life tells us where we have to master first. It doesn't matter what your design is, you have to master it with the design you have.
Yeah.
So you look in yourself for what is the challenge and where are my gifts to meet that challenge. You never wait for somebody else. You only wait till you know what you know because you know it. And let me say, I would recommend, and I recommended it in my webinar yesterday, that all of you go watch The Wizard of Oz with Judy Garland, made way back when, because it talks about the four worlds. And Dorothy wanting to go home is to go back to her own spirit, her own home, autonomy, where she was comfortable. But each of the characters she met is a world. Think about them, identify them, think about them in your own life. All we're doing is laying out ways to master the challenges of this waking world. And we are coming up to an election in the US that is probably the most important election in the history of America.
Mm.
And if it goes the wrong way, the world is going to suffer dramatically.
Mm.
So we're at a very critical time. And it's part of why this knowledge is coming forth. My work is to tell people that the field of psychology has not told you the truth. You live in four worlds, not just the mental world. And the spiritual world is where you need to anchor yourself. Because without living your own spirit, you're never going to find joy or peace or happiness. Do what you love and love what you do. And if you don't love what you do, think about a way to find the way to get where you can love what you do. I've never worked a day in my life because I love what I do.
Mm.
And even though I didn't love school, I loved my goal enough that I put up with something to get me there. And all the work we're doing, all of the studying that you do, all of the probing you do, if it's in service of your higher self, it's going to bring you joy. If it's not, do something else.
Yeah, I've been
You,
playing with that a lot this week. And I can get caught in the mental world of, I need to do this because that will bring in finances and I can stop worrying with those things, but I have to keep putting that voice aside and just, yeah.
you, I've actually never made a decision in my life based on money,
Mhm.
because I've done what I loved and I've done it the way I've loved it. And that did put my license at risk, but I did it anyhow. So do what you love, Sean,
Yeah.
and it will bring the money,
Mhm.
but don't compromise.
No, totally. And the word faith, like, uh, I was, before it was like I was hoping, I was hoping things would work out, and that's not how this works. I have to have faith in the process, so.
You have the skills now to do what you love.
Mhm.
Um, you just have to find your vehicle. Maybe it's teaching pickleball.
It's crossed my mind.
You love pickleball. If you can find a way to use pickleball as the vehicle to teach people consciousness, then you'll be doing what you love.
I've been running an idea through my head for a while here, so I'll run it by you here quick, and then I gotta go. I was calling it pickles and cheese. So it's pickles and then cheese like QI''S. And the idea is, pickleball is the fastest growing sport in the world. There's a lot of people playing it, but being on that court, you need to be focused. You need to be aware. You need to be mobile. You need to conserve your energy. So I just kept thinking like a combo meditation, Tai Chi Gong, breath work class that's really about,
Does your studio have a pickleball court?
no, but I was thinking I would just sort of schedule these things before people would have games in general. Like come, show up as your best.
Okay, so Sean,
Mhm.
take some time and lay it out. Lay it out so you could be doing most of it in your studio, where you're teaching people skills they're going to need. And then you take them to the court and you test it out. But design it. Take it seriously. Take the two things you love doing and do it.
Yep, I'm pretty close. Thank
Good.
you. Okay.
Okay, thank
Gotta
you.
go. That was a blast. We'll talk soon. I'll do that thing where I make this look pro and put an ending on this. Talk to you later.